Well, media companies should probably get some first responder medals, because every time some news comes out that reveals that there are certain things that are going on that are eroding the case of the government in the Trump-Russia investigation. Sorry, I had to put that there. It's distracting. But every time that new news props up about, for example, the Strzok revelations, all those text messages, a lot of the unmasking issues. Well, the media, mainstream media, the mass communications media, CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post, they'll jump in and say, well, this is actually meaningless, and what's really important is to get to the bottom of the Trump-Russia ties. But what they don't realize is that in the world of law, criminal law, and you don't need to be, and I don't have any legal training, but you could talk to criminal lawyers. And when you have a prosecution and you're trying to put somebody in jail for a crime, and you don't follow procedures, legal procedures, that really does jeopardize your case and the odds of success. And in many cases, can lead to career ruining consequences. Now, I think that one of the flaws of the justice system, and we'll get to the actual topic at hand in a minute, is that this sort of depends how famous you are and how much money you have to afford an attorney. Somebody at a very low level, one of these petty drug dealers, for example, or an armed robbery suspect, they probably don't have enough money to spend on proper legal representation. So even if there is prosecutorial misconduct, for example, they don't give evidence that could exonerate the suspect, they don't hand it over to the defense, whether it's the prosecutor or even law enforcement itself, the police department. In some cases, there is nobody to get that person out of the jam. But we're not talking about that type of issue today. We're talking about a suspect in a crime, and now a defendant, who now has, first of all, he's always had at least presentable legal representation, and he probably could, there was also a report, they're hyping it now, that Donald Trump was going to give Michael Flynn basically pay his legal fees through some legal defense fund that he set up. If I don't know how exactly that works. I don't. There's probably some sort of legal loophole that would allow him to do that. For the purposes of transparency, I wouldn't do that if I was Donald Trump. I'd say that's a bad decision on his part, and it kind of shows a slip in the judgment of him and the people around him if he was to try to do that. Not from the legal standpoint. Again, I think that there's probably a workaround for that. Right or wrong, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. I think that it's a bad idea either way. But we're talking about Michael Flynn, getting a new judge, because Judge Contreras, who was the original judge in December, recused himself. This happened a while ago. Rudolph Contreras. So he recused himself. It's very possible that Judge Contreras was the judge who signed off on the FISA warrant in the Flynn case, which means that his recusal would be due to the fact that he was directly involved in the original reason that Flynn was under surveillance. He would have had to have reviewed the evidence from the FISA application, and including that would include the Trump dossier. It's now known that was included among the information, contrary to the testimony and public statements of a lot of these intelligence officials, such as John Brennan and who's that other guy, James Clapper and Jim Comey. So essentially, this revelation that salacious rumors and nonsense were part of the FISA warrant kind of brings brings into doubt the very underpinning of how Michael Flynn got into trouble in the first place. And this was an issue that you know, at the beginning of the whole Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, Carter Page too, and that whole saga. Who's the person I'm thinking of? Andrew McCabe. At the beginning of the whole saga, where there all these text messages were revealed and these other issues involving the FBI end of this issue, all of that was revealed. A lot of people, and that would include myself, and this was back in probably the end of December, beginning of January, began to sort of whisper at the fact that their conduct, their arrogance and hubris, that they would that their position would entitle them to do anything and violate all procedure and in fact violate the law in prosecuting and bringing to justice Flynn and Manafort and Page and you know, this other guy Gates. That would come back to bite them in the ass and basically upend the investigation, because it's no longer going to be you know, this investigation, the Mueller investigation is not going to reveal much about Trump and Russia that would even be believed by probably the majority of the American public. A lot of people have become desensitized to it, and that's for good or bad. For good, well, let's go with the bad first. Well, for bad, well, people should probably know. The people who stopped caring, the people who are back to following the fake NBA, which has been fake for a long time too. So those people should know that this is the way the system of justice in America acts. And if it treats somebody, this is what people don't understand. And I have people who they think that the justice system is biased against, for example, black people, for example, women, minorities, whatever you want to say. Okay, if they're treating somebody like Michael Flynn this way, and going and concocting false reasons to surveil him and look after him. Well, okay. So then imagine how hard they would come down against somebody such as yourself if they deemed you to be a threat, and then you would not have the money if you were one of these underprivileged people to pay for an attorney to mount a proper defense and get you out of that jam. You would probably end up in prison for crime you didn't commit if this did happen to you. So that's the importance of it. And you know, the left-wing media, or if you want to say the corporate media too. Okay, so let's not just talk left-wing or right-wing, but the establishment liberal media and Business Insider is the one that comes most to mind. They've already said that the right-wing media is pushing a dubious claim about Mueller's case against Michael Flynn, and this is Business Insider. So they say these are their first 3 bullet points. The right-wing media has suggested in recent days that new court order in the case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn implies he will be exonerated soon. The judge presiding over the case, Judge Emmett Sullivan, has issued a similar order in every criminal case he's overseen since 2009. Legal experts said the order itself was routine practice, adding that the question wasn't whether Flynn would be exonerated, but whether he would be pardoned by President Donald Trump. You know, I disagree. You know, and okay, so maybe you'd be right to question my judgment because I'm not an attorney and I don't even have any legal education. But you know, what this at least signals is that there's the guilty plea itself could be withdrawn, and then you would simply motion for a retrial. And if the prosecution, you know, the government, the Justice Department decides, well, we find this to be significant enough that we'll pursue a retrial against this person. And you know, they brought out Randal Eliason from George Washington University Law School. You know, they're talking about the fact that you know, on paper it doesn't say anything about him being innocent or about the the case being unwarranted, or the FISA warrants being an issue. But you have to realize that, given a lot of the other discoveries that have been made public about Michael Flynn and the warrant against him and the FISA issue and the sources of information for the dossier, and how the dossier was presented to the judge at the time that the wiretap was signed, or the FISA warrant was signed. This does complicate to a great deal, the whole case. It means that this is the equivalent, basically, of giving Michael Flynn the ball with the 2-minute warning, and 75 yards to go with 3 points down. And it remains to be seen whether, I mean, he could continue to plead guilty. That's a possibility. He could decide to withdraw his plea and fight the case. A number of different results could happen. Nobody is claiming that it's for sure that this guy is innocent. I mean, I'm not even going to claim that Michael Flynn is innocent. I think it's far from being proven that he's guilty of collusion with Russia. That's the problem. And one of the funniest things is that people try to use the fact that he pled guilty to begin with as evidence that this is dirty business. We have a defendant, a Trump-connected defendant, who pleaded guilty. That means that he himself is dirty and all of his associates are dirty. Well, everybody should by now know, if you don't, that Michael Flynn pleaded guilty for lying to the FBI. And lying to the FBI is an issue that it doesn't mean that he spied for Russia. That's not the issue. This is the final paragraph of the order from Judge Sullivan. It says, finally, if the government has identified any information which is favorable to the defendant, but which the government believes not to be material, the government shall submit such information to the court for in-camera review. In-camera means, I guess, it's within chambers. I think that might be in the judge's chambers. Okay, so if you think that you have a better grasp of the situation than me, feel free to comment below. But this idea that a couple days after a new development happens in this case, suddenly the Business Insider comes out and say, "Oh, right-wing media is pushing this narrative that the case is going to be vacated." Well, what do you think is going to happen now that this actual article said that Judge Tyrell has vacated a lot of previous guilty pleas before, in every single case since 2009, when he was when he was put on a case of this level. So they're trying to make it seem like, well, this doesn't mean anything, because normally this doesn't mean that anything changes normally, except for in the case of this judge. But in normal procedural, in terms of that, it doesn't really mean anything. No, it means something. When you have somebody who submitted a guilty plea at a time he did not know something about how the prosecution came to the conclusion that it did, and then presented the evidence against him, and then they left a lot of that information out, then yeah, absolutely, withdrawing the guilty plea could be on the table. And then you want to get speculative? Okay, should it be that Michael Flynn withdraws his guilty plea, and the case either gets dismissed or it gets retried, or the government drops the case? Well, then you start to ask yourself, what exactly has Mueller been able to prove? He's been able to convict a number of people from Russia of a crime that's never been prosecuted, and that likely the people involved will never be tried for it. Because let's face it, there is no extradition from Russia to the United States, especially not in the current climate. So that's a meaningless piece. The Manafort and Rick Gates case, well, that has nothing to do with 2016 election and Trump. And in fact, it in some ways it links more closely to John Podesta, who's by no means a Trump associate. At some point, you know, they would have to start making the case that they have to convict Hillary Clinton and her entire campaign before they convict Donald Trump. That would be, I mean, that would be some sort of Pyrrhic victory if they had to convict all the Democrats in order to get to Trump. That would be, you know, it would be epic. Michael Flynn's case is a display of why we have a government that's out of control. You know, unfortunately, Flynn himself was not the wisest in his decisions, and he was a part of the intelligence community before he got into this trouble. So let's not pretend he's some sort of innocent, you know, shrinking daisy or something. He's a Marine general. He was the director of national intelligence under Obama. Okay, or I think he might have been the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I don't remember which one, but I think he was the DNI guy, director of national intelligence. So, in a certain sense, this is somebody he broke ranks with the rest of his community, and they decided they were going to punish him because they didn't find it to be fitting that somebody should have an alternate opinion about the way that U.S. Security and intelligence policy should be. Not that, I mean, I don't know too much about Flynn's opinions. I might disagree with them just as much as I disagree with Comey's or with Clapper's. But you know, if this is the way they treat them, then like I said, you know, I was watching yesterday the film Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston of Breaking Bad fame. And this was a DEA agent trying to track down and convict money launderers and you know, Pablo Escobar associates and all that during the late 80s and the whole, you know, the cocaine decade and everything. And throughout the movie, they're making allegations of Ronald Reagan, you know, allowing the CIA to traffic cocaine and everything. So this is not a party issue. You know, there have been Republicans who have been involved in this. There have been Democrats who've been involved in this. And it's time to cut the bullshit and stop pretending that this is a partisan issue. You have basically an entire intelligence community that's, you know, they've enlisted every single resource at their disposal in order to preserve their own power. And they don't care whether you're a conservative or a progressive. They don't care whether you're, you know, believe in the freedom of speech or if you believe in universal health care or whatever. They think that they are entitled to the powers that were given to them, you know, unfortunately through Congress, which, you know, they've given over so much power to the executive branch, and through the executive branch, the intelligence community, which has grown its own power, that we see the results right here. And a reversal and an acquittal or a mistrial of this case would be a significant blow to the real dominance of the intelligence community over, you know, the American justice system and over the system of government here. And then we would finally have to start talking about who are these people that they got to this point, that we wasted so much money on Michael Flynn, or we wasted so much money on trying to prosecute these trolls. Who are these people, and what are their acts of misconduct? And that will be the next step if there is a mistrial, and they're happening concurrently. So the mistrial might happen after this probe happens into Brennan and Clapper's dishonesty and Comey and all that, the perjury that they've been committing, which you know, okay, so I can't charge them formally, but I can say they've been dishonest. They've been dishonest in their public statements, and they've been dishonest in their statements under oath. And when they start releasing memos concerning some things that they've said behind closed doors that will be declassified, then we'll start to see really the ugly face of these people. You know, there's always that photo of Comey just with his teeth bared to the camera, That I believe is the real face of Jim Comey, not the gentle giant that he tries to represent himself as to the media. So that's about it. Well, I guess I could talk more about this, but I think that I do want to see what develops next, and kind of leave more for the next coming days. There will be possibly a debate Saturday night on censorship with rap music, but stay tuned. Maybe there will be some other stuff as well. Have a good night, and God bless.